All right, switching gears to organic. First question was just all on can you identify your different functional groups. Hopefully you guys found that one easy. They love to stick it inside a molecule that's more complex, just to kind of make sure you guys understand the real process of how to figure out the types of functional groups. Here's an ester. That one is a secondary amine. That one is a secondary amide, and that one's your carboxylic acid. So be mindful, even if the functional groups are inside the organic molecule, it's still the functional group that you're looking for. This one only went up to an achieved. You need to get 3 of them correct. All right. Next thing here was your naming, identifying, drawing kind of practice. It was a full-on kind of thing with lots of different things there. Most of you guys were either like really good at this or really bad at this. There was a couple of common mistakes that I just needed to point out. With the marking schedule, just so you guys know, I have edited it. I did change the merit so that way it was, I was allowing it for really minor errors, like if you did one thing wrong. I decided between these 2 points. I know originally it was an excellence, but looking at it, I didn't think that was a fair excellence because it was just naming and drawing and identifying, and that to me doesn't show deep surface level knowledge. So I removed it from there, but I did add another excellence points elsewhere in the question so you guys didn't lose out on an excellence. Does that make sense?
Yep.
All right. The main thing that you guys kind of mucked up on this question commonly is you forgot that methyl. So it was 2-methyl prop and 1,2-diol. You didn't actually need the 2 for the methyl because it could only be on carbon number 2. So 2-methyl propan 1,3-diol. Some of you guys did some really weird things when naming this. You put the 1,2-diol at the beginning, or you put 1,3 at the beginning, or you put 1,3 and you put diol. Be really careful because the suffix and the prefix are not interchangeable. So if you're using the prefix version of the alcohol, it's hydroxyl, which you might need to use in some instances, especially when you have 2 functional groups. So for example, this one here, you only have the choice of calling the alcohol a hydroxyl because you have a ketone that's a suffix, and so that has to go towards the end. So hydroxyl is the the prefix, and then the ol is the suffix. So if you're doing that, just make sure you're pairing it correctly. Are we good so far with that? There's not much else that I need to tell you about that question. I was also pretty generous because I was mindful that a lot of these molecules had 2 functional groups. So long as you named one of them, I was going to take it. I just thought it was weird that the marking schedule just put 1 down when it should have put both. Anyway, a lot of you guys then missed this question here about the chiral carbon and circling it. I was very forgiving on this. So long as you drew it correctly in the next question, I was going to forgive that you didn't circle it because I figured you know what you're doing if you drew the chiral carbon correctly. But it was a pretty nasty question in the sense that something you did here snowballed and affected something else in the other bits of the question. So I'll draw this molecule out so you guys know what we are looking for. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I can see it's an acid chloride. And then a 2-chlorine. Again, this is another common mistake. You guys numbered it twice, and you put the chlorine on carbon number 3 instead of carbon number 2. Remember, you can only number it once. And don't be lazy and forget your hydrogens. And also don't add extra hydrogens either, because that's going to mark you wrong. And that's what I would consider like a minor thing in the grand scheme of things if you only did that mistake once. Are we okay with that so far? All right, going through it, I need to find my chiral carbon. Anything with a double bond cannot be a chiral carbon. These 2 guys are out because they have 2 hydrogens, so your only chiral carbon is this guy here, and that's what you were using to draw your optical isomers. So it was unfortunate that this question snowballed and affected that question here, but it does happen quite frequently. Most of you guys were fine with drawing your optical isomers. With the marking schedule, again, I've altered it. So if you circled the chiral carbon and you did one 3D image correctly, or you did both of these correctly, but you made some sort of mistake. So let's say you just drew the carbon wrong in this instance here. and then that error carried through, I would still be willing to give you an achieve point for it, but not a merit point. For this, I've changed it because it says both part 2 and part 3 correct, and that meant if you forgot to circle it, you didn't get a merit, and I thought that's a really silly thing to do. So I was kind and said, so long as you had both your chirocarbons right, I'm assuming you know which one was the chirocarbon, so I'm going to give you the merit point. So yeah, that was that one. This one here, oh, I love it because it was so different to what you guys were used to, and you guys just wrote your same generic answer and didn't think about it. So, 2-chlorobutanol chloride is a liquid at room temperature. Identify 2 physical properties that are the same for both enantiomers and explain how to test for each one of them. You guys just went on autopilot and were like, 2 physical properties, ignored that. How do I test for enantiomers? Like, you basically just read it and thought, how do I test for enantiomers? And then you wrote something about plain polarized light. You didn't read the question. So, and that cracked me up. So this here was a read the question. It's an unusual question. I will let you know that. In most cases, in the mock exam, what they ask you for is, how do you distinguish it? And then you should probably write a sentence about what's similar about it. In this case, they flipped it, and they wanted you to really explain what was similar. So I was very generous because it was a strange question. A lot of you guys struggled with it, so I did adjust the marking schedule accordingly. What I did was I accepted 2 physical properties for the achieved, and I was very generous about it. So if you just said they were mirror images, even though that's not the same property, I still gave it to you as one of your 2. But basically, I was looking for stuff that showed me that you understood some similarities. So maybe you wrote that they're both acid chlorides. Not a great physical comparison, but I would take it because this was a weird question. For the merit, instead of doing 2 tests or explaining 2 tests, I said I would take 1 test, and I was willing to take the polarized light regurgitation. Okay? So I was very kind with that question. I then created an excellence point here because I took it away from the other one. With this excellence point, I said you need to explain 2 tests, and it has to be of the same property. So I was looking at something like you were talking about how you would test for melting point or boiling point, that sort of thing. This one here I thought was quite unfair. A lot of you guys wrote about solubility, but you forgot you were dealing with an acid chloride. And when you put an acid chloride into water to test for solubility, it's going to react very violently. So they wrote down in theirs that would not be an appropriate answer because of that reason. I gave some flexibility because I wasn't sure if you guys were going to catch that. So I said I was going to be willing to accept the solubility test, even though realistically you wouldn't do that because it would just be a violent reaction. I also took I can prove there's an acid chloride because there's a violent reaction. So I was quite flexible with the scope of what I was taking for that one because I thought it was very different from what you guys would usually see. Okay? But just be mindful, stuff like this could happen. So it's good that you see this. Yeah, Rebecca.
Solubility, I wrote boiling point and melting point.
Yeah.
What are other tests you can use to distinguish, the physical properties?
Yeah. Cool. So boiling point, they're saying any suitable method using a thermometer. Melting point was a suitable method to easily measure BP. So yeah. So for example, you would freeze it, and at the same temperature, they would both go solid.
Right.
Yeah. Density. So basically, you would check the mass of it. I was accepting if you just put it on the scale and check the mass of it. It was a strange question. But it's good that you guys saw it in case it happens. So, this is a good reminder to read the question. Okay? All right. This last one here was your identification question. This one, the marking schedule didn't go through and add the oxidants in there, which I thought was quite strange. And you guys obviously wrote a lot about oxidants and using permanganate or dichromate in some of these answers. And so I was willing to still accept it. So just keep in mind, I have updated the marking schedule so that way it includes the oxidants, like the common oxidants, because it does technically work. Most of you guys were fine on it. I was pretty generous with what I took. I was very mindful about the equations. For some reason, you guys just bypass over that bullet point and forget to write equations. So the thing with this one to remember with the equations, I was quite generous because it said that you needed equations for the merit and for the excellence. I adjusted it for merit. I just needed to see one equation, and for excellence, I needed to see two equations. With it, it was mainly just a number game of how many substances did you distinguish. So for the achieved, you gave me 2 correct reagents, or you gave me 2 correct observations, or you gave me 2 correct reaction types, or I was even willing to take 1 correct reagent, observation, and type of reaction because it was trying to be flexible, find you points. For the merit, you needed 3 substances, distinguished, observations, and reagents. So that basically meant you had to get all 3 right, but you forgot to do your equations. Or 2 substances correctly identified with the reagents, with the observation, and I wanted 1 equation. Cool? Because I figured 2 equations is quite hard. Last one here was all chemicals correctly identified with reagents, conditions, observations, and equations. The thing you have to kind of keep in mind as well is that with the identification, we were also looking, this is what I want, the type of reaction. A lot of you guys, again, forgot to include that in the layering of your answer. So just identifying, is it an oxidation, is it a substitution, that sort of thing. Or is it a neutralization? That's what a lot of you guys missed. So the main thing about this question here was you guys weren't using the bullet points and thus were limiting your answers. So do kind of keep that in mind. Ethanamide and aminoethane, this one should be a really easy one. A lot of you guys, for some reason, always think the amide is the base. It's the amine, that's the base. This one's neutral. I got some weird things with this guy saying it was acid. It's not. This one's a silly one to lose points on because it's really quite generic. And also the equation for this one's very easy because all you're showing me is the neutralization of the amine and releasing up a hydroxide. Cool? All right, second one here is your ketone and your aldehyde. I was accepting a wide range of things. There was Benedict's, Fellings, Tollens. There was the oxidants that I was willing to accept, their permanganate and the dichromate, because I'm mindful all those would distinguish the aldehyde from the ketone. Whatever you chose, you needed to make sure to include the equation, and you needed to also identify that it was an oxidation reaction and have the right observations tied to it. There wasn't extra points for giving me more identification tests. All right? A lot of you guys wrote about Tollens and Benedict's and Fellings, and you did all of them. There was only 1 point there. Like, you were better off spending that time writing on the other 2 questions. Okay? So do kind of keep that in mind. Last one here. Oh, I love this one because it was a nice little tricky trickster. This one is your secondary alcohol. This one is your tertiary alcohol. So it's just asking you how do you identify secondary and tertiary. Again, a lot of you guys wrote about your oxidants, which is fine because if you did permanganate or dichromate, the secondary would oxidize and the tertiary would not oxidize. So that was a way you could distinguish it. It wasn't in the marking schedule, but I've added it. And that would have just been your oxidation reaction. And then you would just show the equation for that becoming a ketone. The other one that a lot of you guys forgot about from ages and ages ago is your Lucas test. Lucas test is really, really good because that helps you distinguish between the different tertiary alcohols. So keep in mind the different tertiary alcohols, the different types of alcohols. So tertiary alcohols will react the fastest, secondary will react, but in a slower manner, and then the primary will not react. A lot of you guys lost the points in this, even if you used Lucas reagent, because you forgot to mention what type of reaction it is. It is a substitution reaction. You are removing the alcohol and adding a chlorine to it, and you would be showing 2 equations there because you'd be showing it for the for the secondary and for the tertiary. The other thing to keep in mind is that when you look for positive results, it's going to turn cloudy. So cloudy is the observation you would have there. Cool. That's basically it for that question. A lot of you guys struggled with this one and didn't get your full points on there. And that was, for the most part, a lot of you guys just left one section blank or just didn't answer it fully, and then I couldn't give you any points for it. So there's a lot of achieved for this question purely because you didn't answer enough. Does that make sense? So, if we're looking at that merit point, like I said, 2 substances fully justified, or 3, and you forgot the equation. A lot of you guys, if you left something blank, then that automatically puts you out of this one. And then when you went to do the 2, you didn't put the full information for the 2, and then that dropped you to an achieved. So be careful because marking schedules can be kind of harsh like that. So do try to answer all the question. Do use those bullet points to make sure that you don't forget something. Cool. Any questions on that? Anything you want me to go over again? No?
Let's kind of have a order. Like,
Yeah.
do a 2A IR.
Which one? Are you looking? Which question?
2A IR. You just like to sit up.
This one?
Triple. That one.
This one. I'll do that another day. Yeah, because I'm trying to not go through all of it at once. Just have to keep coming to more classes.